This book had me in the trenches. When I tell y'all trenches, trenches, like, yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, or welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is the first time that you're seeing my face, I'm glad you clicked on for another book review. I am here with the book. I guess it depends on your accent. I feel like a Trini would say ours, but like an American accent would be like ours. So yeah, this is the book. It's by Phillip B. Williams. Let me give you a little peek at Phillip right there real quick. So you can see she's a thick one. But yeah, welcome back. I'm just gonna jump right into it because I have a lot to say. I have a lot to vent about. I have a lot to just complain about because, like I said in my intro, I was in the trenches. Okay, let's just get into it. So, I picked up this book in December, y'all. I finished this book yesterday, April 20th. That's 4 months. Like, that should just tell you all that you need to know, like, as a reader. It took me 4 months to get through this book. Granted, there were some times that I did intentionally stop reading because I wanted to read two other books in between that are already on my channel, so check them out. It was James and then Isaac's Song. So I did pause for a second intentionally, but still, like, I finished those book reviews like months ago, so it still took me a minute to get through this book, and I'm gonna get into the details as of why. So I picked up this book and I read the first chapter of the book in the store that I picked it up. So I was hooked immediately. The first chapter talks about there's this boy that's been shot, and it's been like some time after he's been shot, and his friends, his community is like around the crime scene, and they're basically like mourning him, right? Because he has already died and he's been shot, whatever, and he comes back to life, and people are like, whoa, what's going on? And so that was the first part of the first chapter that I read, and then the second half of it, it kind of transitioned to this community called ours, where it's this lady, her name is Saint, and she like basically founded ours and like keeps it safe and like protected by doing like root work or like dark magic kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, like this is new, this is different, this is interesting. Like I want to read about this and get into it. I wasn't like I wasn't too scared of like the size of the book. I wasn't like, oh, this is gonna be like too like fantasy-ish. Like the intro got me like real. I was like, this looks great. Also, yeah, it was just like a new concept for me of like a hidden community protected by spells and what have you, which is kind of different than what I'm used to. But I was like, this sounds good. Let me get into it, right? You would think. After that first chapter, so let me give you a little bit of like a timeline ish, right? So that's the first chapter. Then it kind of goes into like how Saint populated ours, right? So she gets this call from like voices in her head, or these little like these spirits that call her to these plantations and these places, and she frees the slaves, of course, like killing off the masters and the overseers and whatever, and then she brings them back to ours. So that's how she's like building up the community. And like I said, she does like root work and like dark magic and stuff. So she protects the community, basically makes it invisible to other people by like puts in these like protection stones and all this and that. And all this is like good. I'm like, wow, cool, interesting. Like even at the beginning, there's like a little piece of like somebody like kind of got in, but then she did something to like confuffle his brain, and he like ended up outside and he couldn't remember. So it was like good, like fantasy, like interesting, engaging, all that good stuff. But when I tell you 25 to 50% of this book felt so like, what is the point here? why do we need to know all this information? And I feel bad. I honestly feel bad to even think that, because as an author myself, like I haven't authored like an adult book. I've only authored a children's book that was like this thin, right? So it's different worlds. But as an author myself, like I feel bad to say like what's the point of all this information? But like as a reader, I was like, what's the point of all this information? Like I got this, so this is a thick book, like I said. There's like 500 and something pages, close to 600. And like one quarter of the way through, I had already forgotten that introduction chapter that like somebody had been killed and brought back to life. I was like, wait, is this the same book? Mind you, I started in December, read two books in between, and then was on the struggle bus with this one. So like all that stuff was just really like playing into it. And all the filler and the in between and the stories, and it was cool, and it gave the book like texture, and like, you know, it's good to like learn about these other characters, but I wasn't seeing the connection to like where, like I didn't know where we were going. I was like, how is this book ending? How is it tying back to like what was even in the beginning? Was that just a boat, like a, you know, like a, you know, sometimes people like put in a chapter or so that's like very loosely related, or like it's like I can't explain it. Anyway, so there's just many, many, many stories about like the people that she's brought to ours. And so it's like some of them will tell their like slave stories of like before they came to ours. Some of them will tell what it's been like living in the community and trying to like, you know, have a relationship with Saint. Saint is this like very, very, very complex, unknowable, unreachable leader, but she wants the people to like love her and respect her, but then she also don't, she's like kind of like, it was just so much, so much, so much, so much. And so like throughout the book, her powers like, you know, start fading, because she's dealing with so much on her own. She's dealing with like trying to like figure out like how to control her powers. She's dealing with trying to figure out like where she came from, like her past, because some of her like memory is fading. She is like kind of like very angry and violent and like disconnected from the people that she brought to this community, like her community. And so it's just a lot. Like it's just like a lot of information. Just read, just read, just read. To the point, like I said, where halfway through, a quarter way through, halfway through, three quarters of the way, I'm just like, hello, hello, where are we going here? You know? And then I want to say like within the last 100 pages, I could finally see like everything connecting, which I guess helped to for me to like push through, because I was like talking to people, my friends at work, and I was like, I have to finish this book. I have to finish this book. There has to be a point of all of this. And they were like, girl, do DNF this book, please. And I was like, no, I have to see what happens. And then I want to say like at least in the last 100 pages, 75 pages, you kind of see like how one of the people that ends up like finding ours and like coming into ours, is the person that helps say face her past and then ultimately like help her heal. So, and then it does tie back to the original story of the boy getting shot. It does like help you understand Saint a little bit more. But I just feel like this book could have been like half the size if we, you know, went without some of those. There was just a lot going on. So yeah, let me just get into. So it was a decent book overall. Like I feel like if you like not sci-fi, if you like fantasy stuff, if you like, you know, like slavery or post-slavery stories, if you like, you know, like magic and that type of stuff, this might be right up your alley. Just be prepared to be bombarded with information and for it to be a slow burn. That's all I'm going to say. It is definitely the slowest of burns, okay? All right, so let's get into the things that I liked. I like in the story when there are like multiple characters and you can learn their histories and their stories and where they came from and how their stories can be like interconnected and build off of each other. I love that stuff. Some of it I was just like, Okay, like, yeah, it was just good to know. I would just say that not all the stories tie towards the final plot, if that makes sense. Some of the stories was just like, here you go. It kind of reminded me of that's the book it reminded me of. It reminded me of two books actually. One, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. I think in my review of that one, I was like, we could have done without like 16 of these characters. And in both, I liked the characters. Their stories were interesting, but like, that's what it reminds me of. I'm so glad that that just came to me right here. And this book also reminded me of Liberty, which I feel like at the time, maybe I was just like too dumb to understand Liberty. I might have to go back and reread Liberty because I felt like I didn't understand anything that was going on in that book. But yeah, it's that same kind of like slow burns. It's just like, oh, please. And then the other thing that I liked, I only have two things on my list, guys. Says a lot. Um, the other thing that I liked is that because it's talking about like slavery and all that kind of stuff, there is some mention of like Caribbean and like related things that I've heard while growing up. So like if you're Caribbean or maybe yeah, if you're from the Caribbean, you might have heard like somebody say like, "Oh, don't give the child like maljo" or something like that, right? And maljo is kind of like this combination of words that means basically like looking at some like if you look at someone too much you could like yeah, let me just read it because I don't want to give it like the I don't want to say the wrong thing. I actually had to look it up. So it's a French derived term meaning evil eyes. It refers to the belief where a conscious or unconscious gaze of envy or ill will is believed to bring harm to someone. So like I've heard that growing up, and like in the book they kind of like mentioned like like certain things like that. So I was like, okay, this is nice to like hear some things that are like that I could relate to. But other than that, those are the things that I liked for sure. Let's get into the dislikes. So, like I said, I think it was just a little bit too long with a little bit of like unnecessary bits. And again, as an author, I feel bad to say that. As a reader, that's just how I feel. Okay, I can have both. There was a heavier mention of like voodoo roots, black magic than I was anticipating. So, like I said, I read the first chapter, I read the sleeve, and I knew to expect some form of like that type of stuff, but it did go into like a lot of detail and I just think for me I was okay, but like for the more sensitive reader or the more spiritual reader in terms of like their faith, it might just excuse me, it might just be like something you don't want to associate with. So just be on the lookout for that. Um some of the things was just tough to understand. Like and this is the same thing with what I'm saying with Liberty, right? So I I'm going to read a sentence from this book that was like in the last few pages. And I really hope that like this finds the right audience because I need people to help me. And I'm willing to admit that it's just me. Maybe I'm just not such an amazing like I just don't get the like play on words and like how I just couldn't imagine this in my brain. And so the fact that this type of writing was like scattered all throughout all almost 600 pages really, like I said, had me in the trenches. So I'm gonna read it. One sentence, and y'all can tell me, okay? It says, water gathers around her shins until the wall becomes the floor and her shoulders switch places with her feet. I'm gonna read it one more time. Water gathers around her shins until the wall becomes the floor and her shoulders switch places with her feet. What are we talking about? Is it me? Because if it's me, like y'all could just tell me. Like, is it me? Am I just like a slow like I just don't get like the like what does that mean? I get like the water gathers around her shin, so the water's tall, right? the wall becomes the floor. So she's in a boat. Is the boat tilting over? So the the wall becomes the floor. Shoulders switch place. All I'll say is that this same type of like tough to like follow visually or like mentally writing is all through the book, which I think made it even harder for me to like lock in. Like there was so many times where I just reread the same sentence, the same paragraph, and I think which added to like my slow read of the book. But again, if you are used to like this type of writing, it might just be like, oh, Brittany, you are so slow. Like this is light work, and then fine. That's all I'll say. Um, but yeah, the themes are like I said, voodoo, black magic, roots, like ancestral work. There's a lot of that going on, so just be mindful if that's not something you want to read about. Slavery and repercussions of slavery. So everybody that was a part of ours, the community, was an ex-slave. Or they had like this like deep pull to like come to that community, but they all had like these like really traumatic backgrounds and history that you will read and learn about. There's a lot of like violence, death, like some of the details are very like gory. There's love, of course, there's loss, severe trauma, some healing, right? Some people find healing, some people don't. There's like suicide in there. But it's mostly just like a bunch of like fantasy-ish stuff. So yeah, that's it for me. I still have to kind of think of how I think I'll give the book like 3.5. 3.54. I'll finalize before I put this video out. I still do want more people to read the book because I want to hear what people thought about it. To just see if I'm just, it just wasn't my favorite cup of tea, It could be a little cup of tea sometimes, but not my favorite. So yeah, that was there were just like very minor spoilers, but not really. So that was my review of ours. Let me know if you've read it and if you had any of the same thoughts as me, or like of course if you disagree and you thought it was a beautiful book. I would love to hear that as well. Um, Let me know if you want to read it, if you read it already. And yeah, just meet me down in the comments. I'm already on to my next book, so you will have another one coming your way very soon. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.